Hello everyone, I'm Kanupriya Sharma from GMATQuizMaster. In this video, we will solve this RC passage together step by step. The goal is not just to understand what this passage says, but to build a reading process that works under exam conditions. Let's get started. Here is the passage. Let's start with passage analysis. In current historiography, so we are talking about current means present, and historiography is something related to history, maybe some study related to history or something. So, in this current or present historiography, the picture of a consistent, unequivocal decline in women's status with the advent of capitalism and industrialization. So, we are talking about a picture. What is this picture conveying? Picture is of a consistent. Consistent means steady. Unequivocal means there is no doubt about it. It is definitive. So, a steady and definitive decline in women's status with the advent of capitalism and industrialization means when capitalism and industrialization started, since then the women's status has been consistently and definitively reducing. And this is the entire picture. This is the entire image. This is the entire impression. This impression is giving way to an analysis. Giving way means it is being replaced by. So, this picture is being replaced by an analysis. What kind of analysis? That not only emphasizes both change, and we'll come back to this portion, and continuity. So, this particular analysis emphasizes, that is, it stresses on both change as well as continuity, but also accounts for geographical and occupational variation. So, this new analysis focuses on change as well as continuity, and it also accounts for geographical and occupational variation. So this is a difference between this current picture which is there, the current impression which is there, and the new analysis which is slowly replacing the current picture. Now how is this new analysis different? This new analysis, it focuses on change. Now change can be improvement or decline. The present picture which we are talking about here is only of decline, but the new analysis, it focuses on both kind of changes, whether it is improvement or decline, and it also focuses on continuity. Now what exactly is meant by continuity, we do not know, but this is a feature, this is a characteristic that we need to keep in mind. We'll get an answer to what this continuity can mean, but it is something that the present picture is not doing. And it also accounts for geographical and occupational variation, that is how things change with location. So if we look at different locations, what is the impact of that? And what is the impact of occupational variation? That is difference in occupation. So what is the difference? What is the impact of difference in occupation? Now this sentence talks about a lot of things, and we have understood the meaning of these small chunks. Let's now combine this picture. So we are talking about the current way, and in this current way there is this picture which is being replaced by a new analysis, right? So what is happening is the current way has this picture. What is the picture? The picture is that capitalism and industrialization started, right? And so let's say if it started here, then after this, women's status declined consistently and unequivocally. So this is women's status. This is the current view, right? This is the current view. What is the new analysis? Or let me write it with a different color. As per the new analysis, how is it different? The new analysis, it considers change which can be positive or negative. It is not just about a decline, it is talking about improvement also. It talks about continuity, which we are yet to understand completely. Also, it addresses these two things are what it focuses on, it emphasizes on, and it also takes into account the location or the geography and impact of occupational variation. So this is change that is being discussed. This change has been introduced in the first line by the author. There are a lot of things that are not clear. For example, when this capitalism and industrialization started, what this current picture exactly is, what is this analysis exactly about, what is this continuity about. So there are a lot of things that we still need to understand. But yes, we know that this passage starts with introducing this change, which is from the current picture and what it is being replaced by. Her influential Women Workers and the Industrial Revolution 1930. So we are talking about an influential work. Influential means it had influence, right? It is important in terms of its contribution, in terms of the influence that it had. And because we are talking about her, so we are going to talk about a female author. And what is the name of this work? This is Women Workers and the Industrial Revolution. So the work was about women workers and industrial revolution. Now you can relate it back to industrialization. And this work was published in 1930, which is the end of this period that we are considering. Pinchbeck. So Pinchbeck is the author here. Pinchbeck is this author, and her influential work was Women Workers and Industrial Revolution. Argued. So this is something that Pinchbeck argued. This is not something that true. This is something that Pinchbeck said or claimed. So what did Pinchbeck claim? She claimed that the agricultural revolution. So now agricultural revolution is a new thing. We read about capitalism and industrialization. This agricultural revolution is a new thing. So let's understand where it fits. Agricultural revolution of the 18th and early 19th centuries. So this is the duration of agricultural revolution. And if you compare it to this time period, 18th century was before this time period, right? Before 1800, and early 19th century would be something like 1820s, 1830s. So the agricultural revolution, it was here in this time, before the time that we are discussing in our example of English farmhouse cheese making between 1800 and 1930. The agricultural revolution was, before this it started before this, and it went all till 1820s or 30s. That was the early 19th century. Okay, so let's understand what this agricultural revolution has to do with its attendant specialization and enlarged scale of operation. So agricultural revolution had these two characteristics: attendant specialization and enlarged scale of operation. Attendant specialization can be said to be that whoever was a part of this agricultural revolution had some kind of specialization. Specialization that can be like one specific skill in which they are specialist. All right. And enlarged scale of operation can mean that now they were no longer confined to small scale operation. They were, the agricultural revolution was focusing on enlarged scale of operation, on increased scale of operation. So these are the two characteristics of this agricultural revolution. And with these two characteristics, the agricultural revolution curtailed women's participation in the business of cheese production. So again, we are talking about this cheese making, and Pinchbeck is arguing that this agricultural revolution with these characteristics, it limited women's participation in business of cheese production. So it is saying that it is kind of a negative impact of this agricultural revolution on women's participation in this business. Let's read further. Earlier, she maintained, women had concerned themselves with feeding cows, rearing calves, and even selling the cheese in local markets and fairs. So, before this agricultural revolution, as per Pinchbeck, women had these multiple roles. What were the multiple roles? Feeding cows, rearing calves, and even they could go to sell cheese in local markets and fairs. Pinchbeck thought, now this is all Pinchbeck, these are not facts, these are what Pinchbeck believed. Pinchbeck thought that the advent of specialization, now this advent of specialization can be connected to this attendant specialization. So this starting of specialization, this beginning of specialization meant that women's work in cheese dairying was reduced simply to processing the milk. So as soon as this agricultural revolution started and the specialization started, women's role was limited and it was reduced to processing the milk. So in cheese making, now they were just processing the milk. From playing multiple roles, their role was limited to just one task, that is processing the milk. Dairymen. So this is in quotes. So this is a specific term, a new social category. This was a new. This term does not. This category did not exist earlier. So dairymen raised and fed cows. So you can see that this is a role that was being played by women earlier, and sold the cheese through factors also who were also men. So again, out of these multiple roles, this raising and feeding cows, it went to men, from women to men, and selling cheese in the market also went to men, were limited only to this particular task. So Pinchbeck is saying that this specialization, it limited the role of women. With this narrowing of the scope of work, so this is the narrowing of the scope of work that Pinchbeck is discussing. Pinchbeck believed, again, this is a belief of Pinchbeck, not a fact, women lost business ability, independence, and initiative. So this is the negative effect women faced with this specialization, with this agricultural revolution. So what is this paragraph doing here? The paragraph first presented this current picture and this new analysis. The current picture just is only about it shows just decline in women's status. It conveys that this women's status declined consistently and definitively. However, this current analysis is being replaced by new analysis, which focuses on change, which is improvement as well as decline, continuity, and other factors that can affect it. So the paragraph does not discuss about this new analysis a lot. It considers one case, that is English farmhouse cheese making. This is the case study that we are discussing. And the author presents work of one writer, and this is an influential work. The writer Pinchbeck has been seen to be presenting her views that this agricultural revolution, it kind of had a negative impact on women. So you can relate it to this decline. The entire view of Pinchbeck indicates that women's status declined. Now, what is still not clear is how the capitalism and industrialization are related to agricultural revolution, but we can feel that somehow these are related. We have not been given any information to relate these two, but because this example has been presented here and it relates to this first view or the current view, most likely this agricultural revolution would be related to industrialization and capitalism. Now let's read the second paragraph. Though means a contrast. All right. Pinchbeck portrayed pre-capitalist, pre-industrial conditions as superior to what followed. Now, in the last paragraph, we saw that Pinchbeck's work was about agricultural revolution, what used to happen before agricultural revolution and what happened after it. However, here we are saying that Pinchbeck portrayed pre-capitalist, pre-industrial conditions as superior to what followed. So the author is conveying that the time before agricultural revolution is the pre-capitalist and pre-industrialist period, which means the author is indicating that the capitalism and industrialization started here only with agricultural revolution. The author has not claimed it directly, but indirectly we can understand that this is where capitalism and industrialization would have started. So this was a question. We were not able to relate this agricultural revolution with advent of capitalism and industrialization earlier. Now we can say that probably it was both, all three started at the same time or around the same time. And this is a contrast given to us here that Pinchbeck portrayed this particular time period as superior. It was better. As per Pinchbeck, it was better because here women were playing multiple roles, and here we are saying they were limited to just one task. So Pinchbeck is saying that this one was superior. This period was superior. Now, although Pinchbeck is portraying this to be better, this to be the better time period, recent scholarship. Now, recent scholarship can be related to the new analysis or something which is new, because the first paragraph told us how the current picture is giving way to the new analysis. So maybe this recent scholarship is related to new analysis, and we have a contrast also, because here also this current picture or the current way is different from the new analysis. The new analysis focuses on multiple factors, while the current picture is only about the decline. So let's understand if this contrast is in line with the current and the new analysis. So recent scholarship has seriously questioned the notion of golden age for women in pre-capitalist society. So the new scholarship, which can be related to the new analysis, is questioning this notion of golden age for women, which means they are questioning that was it really that good? They are questioning that notion, that perception, that understanding that the pre-capitalist society was a golden age. It was really good. They are questioning. For example, so we have been given an example to explain this point. Scholars, which are these scholars? These recent scholars, the new scholars. Scholars note that women's control seldom extended to the disposal of the proceeds of their work. So the way it is written, we know that it is a negative thing. What is the negative thing? That women's control rarely extended to the disposal of the proceeds of their work. Now, proceeds of their work, disposal of the proceeds of their work, if you do not understand it, you'll have to think about it. Proceeds of the work can be related to the output of the work. Output can be in terms of profit or salary or exposure, whatever experience, right? The proceeds of the work can be related to that. Now, what this example is saying, that scholars note that women did not have a control over this. Women could not control, or themselves, they did not have that right to control whatever they were getting, whatever they were generating from their work. Now, that is a negative thing. Pinchbeck was saying that, okay, pre-industrial period was better because women could do so many work, so many tasks, so many different activities. But the scholars are saying that no, they did not have, uh, they did not usually have right over the proceeds of their work, which is a negative thing. And you can understand that this is how they are questioning the notion of golden age for women in pre-capitalist society. Now, till now, the scholars have not said that post-capitalism was good, but they are saying that the pre-capitalist society was probably not golden age for women. In the case of cheese, so we are again coming back to cheese making, the rise of factors were the men who were selling cheese. We read that in the previous passage. So the rise of these factors, that is the coming up and becoming usual or popular of the factors, may have compromised women's ability to market cheese. We know that women were no longer given that task to market cheese at fairs. This was being done at factors. Now the scholars agree that this rise of factors, it may have compromised their ability to market cheese at fairs, but this is a contrast. Merely selling the cheese did not necessarily imply access to the money. And this is how you can now confirm your understanding of this proceeds of their work. That yes, this change during the agricultural revolution, it had this negative effect that women were no longer allowed to go to the market or the fairs to market cheese. So it compromised their ability to do that. But this activity of selling the cheese does not mean that they also had access to money. Maybe they were just working, they were not, whatever they were earning was given to someone else. They did not have control on their money. And that would have been a negative thing. So that is how the scholars are questioning this notion of golden age for women. Davidoff. So this is a name we have not read yet. We may get to know who this person is. Let's read further. Davidoff cites the case of an Essex man who appropriated all but a fraction of money from his wife's cheese sales. So, Davidoff is some person, we do not know who this person is, but this Davidoff gives us an example of a man who took all the money that the women earned, that his wife earned, and left just a small fraction for the wife. So, this complete paragraph, what it shows, it kind of challenges Pinchbeck's claims. And what is the claim that this passage challenges? It challenges that if industrialization began here, this was pre industrialization, this was post industrialization. Pinchbeck claims that this was a golden age for women. But what is the challenge? It challenges, the new scholarship challenges this view by questioning, or they question this view. And the example provided is that the women, or rather, we would have it here only. The example is also of the pre industrial area, that women were allowed to do more tasks but did not have control on their money. That was still, that power was still with the men or their husbands. So this paragraph kind of changes from the current picture, which is about decline. It changes to how this is being challenged. We still don't know that this improved or not, because the first passage talks about improvement, decline, continuity, everything. But we do not know anything about that yet. But this is how the current view is being challenged. Now, the third paragraph. By focusing on somewhat peripheral operations, moreover, Pinchbeck missed a substantial element of continuity in women's participation. So we get to know about another disadvantage of Pinchbeck's view, or something that Pinchbeck missed. And we are saying that this is a substantial element that Pinchbeck missed, and this substantial element is continuity. So see this continuity that we are talking about. We discussed it in the first passage, that new analysis focuses on continuity. Now we will get to know what this continuity means. Now this continuity is in women participation, that women continue to participate most likely in work, the activity that they were doing. And this is something that Pinchbeck missed. Pinchbeck was focusing on somewhat peripheral operations, that is, somewhat kind of irrelevant things. And because of that, Pinchbeck missed a substantial, important element of continuity in women's participation. Let's read further. Throughout the period, so we are still discussing this period 1800 to 1930, throughout this period, women did the central work of actually making cheese. So we know that Pinchbeck said that they were limited to processing the milk. But here, the author is saying that this was the central work. That is one thing. Plus, they continued working. That is the continuity factor. They were not taken away from work. They did not have to discontinue their work. They were still a part of the work. They were restricted to one task, but this task was the central task of processing the cheese, of making the cheese. So that is what Pinchbeck missed. Their persistence, so persistence of these women in English cheese making, their continuity in English cheese dairying contrasts with women's early disappearance from arable agriculture in southeast England and from American cheese dairying. So, what is being compared? The continuity of English women in English cheese making is being compared with early disappearance. So, in these activities, arable agriculture in southeast England and American cheese dairying, in these two activities, women disappeared. They did not continue their work. So, what is being contrasted? That in English cheese making, they continued, even if they were restricted to one role, and that was the central role. If we compare it to other women in other areas, so you can see the location. A different location has been mentioned here, which is the American location, and occupational variation. So you can see that we are also talking about arable agriculture. So that is a different occupation in southeast England. So English and England are like the same place. So we are talking about southeast England, women who were employed in arable agriculture in southeast England and women who were employed in American cheese dairying. They discontinued their participation. On the other hand, women in English cheese dairying continued their participation and they were doing the central work of actually making cheese. So you can see how this perspective is being changed. Earlier, we thought that this limitation, or what Pinchbeck tried to highlight, was that this limitation of women to processing the milk was a negative thing for women. Their role was restricted, their ability was restricted. That was a negative way of portraying what history told us, right? And it was in line of presenting this decline, this consistent decline in women's status. However, the new scholars, what they are doing, they are saying one thing, that this pre-industrial area, it was not a golden period. There were problems here also. Now, post-industrial society, yes, their role was restricted, but they were doing the central work. So it was good in a way. Plus, if you bring in the factor of continuity, location, and occupational variation, you will see that there were some positives that these English women working in cheese dairying experienced. They could continue their work and they were doing the central job of making cheese, in contrast to the women who were working in other occupations in other areas. So that is how this view of this current picture is being replaced by this new analysis. This is how these two are different. Comparing these three divergent developments. So what are the three divergent developments? One is English cheese dairying. Second is arable agriculture in southeast England. Third is American cheese dairying. So how things changed in these three different areas yields some reasons for the differences among them. So these developments, how these developments were different, they also tell us why these developments were different. Let's read further. English cheese making. So we are talking about this specific activity that has been our point of discussion. English cheese making women worked in a setting in which cultural values, agricultural conditions, and the nature of their work combined to support their continued participation. So all the factors in English cheese making, the cultural values, the agricultural conditions, and nature of their work, everything supported their continued participation. They could carry on their work. So all the factors were supporting their continued participation. While in the other cases, that is in England, arable agriculture, and in American cheese dairying, what happened was one or more of these elements was lacking. So because of one or more of these elements lagging, women could not continue their work. So this third paragraph, this combines everything. This shows us how this view is changing, what this new analysis is doing, how it is bringing in continuity, how it is bringing in location, how it is bringing in occupational variation. It gives us a comparison of these English cheese making women with women who were working in arable agriculture in Southeast England and women who were working in American cheese dairying. And it showed that how these women could continue their work because every factor supported their continuity. Also, this passage says that the evidence that we have, the information that we have from history, the first view was considering it to be negative for women. But it can be, if you bring in more factors, you will see that this was actually a positive thing. We cannot really say that this was golden age and here there was a continuous decline. That is something that is being challenged with examples and with explanation. So, what is the main point of this passage? We know the passage presented a shift from previous view, from the current view to a new view. There are some changes in the way scholars are now evaluating the same situation. The author took a specific case study, which was about women's work in English farmhouse cheese making in a specific duration. Then the author presented one view, that is Pinchbeck's view, which is in line with the old view about consistent and unequivocal decline in women's status. And then the author illustrates how the new scholars are challenging this view, how they are challenging this view, and how this view is being replaced by a new view that focuses on positive as well as negative change, on the impact of continuity, on the impact of location and occupational variation. So, if I have to write it specifically, I would say the passage uses English farmhouse cheese making as a case study to illustrate the shift in scholarly views from a narrative of consistent, unequivocal decline in women's status to a more nuanced framework that accounts for change, continuity, and geographical and occupational variation. If I have to present a generic main point, I would say that the passage uses a case study to illustrate the shift in scholarly views. With this, we have analyzed the complete passage. Now, solve the questions on your own. While solving each question, keep three things in mind. First, what exactly is the question stem asking? Second, what must the correct answer choice convey? And third, what exactly is each choice conveying? Reject incorrect answer choices only for clear reasons and select one only for a clear reason. Once you are done, you can review your thought process using the solutions linked below. These solutions will help you pinpoint the exact gaps in your understanding if there were any. Good luck.